something your date did or said that made you go, I'm definitely going on another date with this person? Story 1. I met this guy on a dating app and we agreed to meet at a local coffee shop. We were both a bit nervous at first, but as soon as we started talking, the conversation just flowed. We discussed everything from our favorite TV shows to our childhood memories. But what really stuck with me was when he started talking about his passion for volunteering at animal shelters. He went on and on about how much joy it brought him, and how he hoped to one day open his own shelter. The way his eyes lit up when he spoke about it made me realize just how deeply he cared about helping others. I've always admired people who are driven by such selfless goals, and hearing him speak about it with so much enthusiasm made me feel a connection I hadn't expected. By the end of the date, I knew I was definitely going to see him again. I admired his kindness, and it was clear that he was someone who genuinely cared about making the world a better place. Story 2. My date and I were having dinner at a small Italian restaurant, and everything seemed to be going pretty well. He was funny, easy to talk to, and we had some good laughs over pasta. But what really caught my attention was how he treated the staff. At one point, the waiter made a small mistake with our order, but my date just smiled and reassured him that it wasn't a big deal. He even cracked a joke to make the waiter feel at ease. I was so impressed by his patience and kindness, especially since I've experienced dates where the person got irritated over the smallest things. The way he handled the situation showed me that he had a calm and understanding nature, and that was something I valued deeply. By the time dessert arrived, I was certain that I wanted to see him again. The way he treated others said so much about his character, and I loved that about him. Story 3. I met a girl through mutual friends and we decided to grab drinks one evening. We started talking about our hobbies, and I mentioned how I had recently gotten into hiking but hadn't done it much since moving to the city. She immediately got excited and said she loved hiking and had a list of trails she'd been wanting to try. Then, without missing a beat, she suggested we go on a hike together the next weekend. It wasn't just the idea of hiking that made me excited. It was her enthusiasm and spontaneity. I wasn't expecting her to suggest an actual plan for the future on the spot, and it made me feel like she was genuinely interested in spending more time together. We didn't even need to finish our drinks before I knew I wanted to go on another date with her. Her confidence and adventurous spirit made it clear we could have a lot of fun together. Story 4. I was on a date with this guy I had met through a mutual friend. We decided to go to a local bar, and everything was going smooth. We had similar senses of humor and enjoyed discussing random topics. But the moment that stood out to me was when he shared his experience of dealing with a difficult breakup. He was so open and vulnerable, explaining how it took him a long time to heal and how he had grown from the experience. He didn't blame anyone or play the victim, he just shared what he had learned and how it had shaped him. It made me admire him so much, and I knew that kind of emotional intelligence and honesty was rare. I wasn't expecting him to get so deep, but hearing his vulnerability made me feel more connected to him than I thought possible after just one date. By the end of the evening, I was already thinking about what our next date might look like. Story 5. I had been chatting with this guy for a while before we finally went out for dinner. We chose a cozy restaurant and I was feeling a bit nervous, hoping the chemistry would be as strong in person as it had been online. As the evening went on, I found myself relaxing more and more, enjoying his company. But the thing that really made me want to see him again was when he told me how he had been working on a project to help kids in underprivileged neighborhoods learn how to code. He explained how he felt passionate about making tech education more accessible, and I was floored by how much effort he put into it. I loved hearing about his dedication to the project and how much he believed in using his skills for good. It was inspiring, and it made me think he was someone who could make a real difference. It also made me feel proud to be out with someone so thoughtful and driven. By the end of the evening, I had already started thinking about how amazing it would be to go on another date with him. Story 6. I met someone through a mutual friend, and we decided to grab coffee at a cozy little cafe in the city. It was one of those places where the ambiance felt like you were stepping into a bookshop, with soft jazz playing in the background and the smell of freshly brewed coffee filling the air. We sat down by the window, and everything started off pretty casual. We talked about the usual stuff: work, hobbies, how our weeks had been. But then the conversation took a turn I wasn't expecting. He told me about his job as a social worker, which I had already known. But what really stood out was how deeply he cared about his clients. He shared a story about a young teenager he had been working with who was going through a tough time. Instead of just focusing on the professional aspect of the work, he opened up about the emotional connection he had developed with the teen and how he felt responsible for helping them get back on track. He wasn't just doing his job, he was genuinely invested in making a difference in the lives of others. As he spoke, I noticed how passionate he was, and how he didn't seem to need recognition for the work he was doing. It wasn't about awards or accolades, it was about his desire to make the world a better place, one person at a time. I found myself sitting there, completely captivated by the sincerity in his voice. At that moment, I knew I was definitely going on another date with him. I admired the way he cared so deeply about others, and it was clear that he wasn't just looking for a casual relationship. His heart was in the right place, and I couldn't wait to see him again. Story 7. My date with Sarah started like many first dates do. Nervous but hopeful. We met at a quaint little restaurant in town, and from the moment we sat down, I could tell there was a spark between us. The conversation flowed easily, and we laughed about silly things like childhood memories and the weird food combinations we used to love. But it wasn't until the dessert course that I realized I was definitely going on another date with her. We were both enjoying a shared slice of tiramisu when she casually mentioned that she had just finished reading a book on climate change and was inspired to start a new personal project, creating an eco-friendly fashion. I was blown away. She had always been passionate about sustainable living, but hearing how she was planning to turn that passion into a real-world project made me admire her even more. As she talked about her vision for the future, I couldn't help but think about how much effort and dedication she was willing to put into something she truly believed in. She was already brainstorming ideas for using recycled materials, partnering with local artisans, and raising awareness about the environmental impact of fast fashion. I was inspired by her creativity, her passion, and her commitment to making a tangible difference. It was that moment, the moment when I realized she wasn't just looking for a date, but someone who shared her values, that made me want to see her again. She was driven, passionate, and incredibly thoughtful, and I couldn't wait to learn more about her vision for the future. Story 8. I had been on a few dates before this one, but none had felt quite as exciting and unexpected as my date with Liam. We had met through a mutual friend and decided to meet for drinks at a cozy pub near my place. From the moment we sat down, I could tell we had great chemistry. We talked about everything from our favorite music to our most embarrassing moments as kids. But it wasn't until later in the evening that I truly realized I was definitely going on another date with him. After a few rounds of drinks, the conversation shifted to something more serious. He mentioned that he had recently started a side business doing photography, and that it was his way of rediscovering his creative side. It was inspiring to hear how he had taken a leap of faith and turned his passion into something tangible, even though it meant taking on a lot of extra work. But what really stood out was the way he spoke about his work. It wasn't about the money, the recognition, or even the success. It was about his love for capturing the world in a different light. He told me how much he enjoyed photographing candid moments and how he wanted his photos to tell a story that went beyond what people could see at first glance. I could hear the excitement in his voice, and I realized that I was talking to someone who wasn't just pursuing a hobby, but was building something meaningful. That kind of passion was contagious. As the night wore on, I found myself thinking about how much I wanted to see him again. He had a drive and a creativity that I couldn't resist, and I knew our next date would be just as exciting as the first. Story 9. My date with Ben started off just like any other casual conversation over dinner at a trendy restaurant, both of us trying to figure out if there was any chemistry. The small talk was easy enough, but it wasn't until the end of the evening that something really made me think, I'm definitely going on another date with this person. Ben casually mentioned that he had recently started volunteering at a local food bank. He said that after a few years of focusing solely on his career, he realized he wanted to give back to the community. I didn't expect it, but as he explained his volunteer work, I could see how genuinely dedicated he was. He told me how much joy he found in helping others, especially during the holidays when the need was greatest. The way he talked about the people he had met and the families he had helped really struck a chord with. He didn't just see it as something to add to his resume or a way to feel good about himself. It was about the people, the connections, and the impact he could have on their lives. It wasn't just about the work itself. It was about the way Ben's eyes lit up when he talked about it. His passion for making a difference in the world, no matter how small, was incredibly attractive to me. It made me think that this was someone who wasn't just interested in having a good time on a date, but someone who was genuinely interested in the deeper things in life. By the end of the evening, I knew I wanted to get to know him better. Story 10. I had been talking to this guy Mark for a few weeks before we finally decided to meet up. We met for a casual lunch at a local cafe, both a little nervous but excited at the same time. The conversation started off slow, but once we started talking about our travels, the whole dynamic changed. Mark had spent several months backpacking through Southeast Asia and had some of the most amazing stories to tell. He talked about getting lost in Thailand, trying new foods, and the time he stayed in a remote village with no electricity. I loved how he didn't just see traveling as a checklist of places to visit. To him, it was about the experience, the people he met along the way, and the memories he made. What struck me the most, though, was when he shared a story about how he had volunteered at a school in a rural village. He explained how he spent several weeks teaching English to kids who had never been exposed to the language before. It wasn't easy, but He said it was one of the most rewarding experiences of his life. His sense of adventure, mixed with his genuine desire to help others, was inspiring. It made me think that he was someone who not only enjoyed living life to the fullest, but was also grounded in a sense of purpose. By the end of our lunch, I knew I was definitely going on another date with Mark. He was someone who had a zest for life and a heart of gold, and I couldn't wait to learn more about his travels and hopefully join him on his next adventure. Story 11. I met Anna through a dating app, and we decided to meet for coffee at a small cafe downtown. The place had a cozy vibe, and we immediately clicked as soon as we sat down. Our conversation flowed easily, from our favorite books to the last vacation we took. But it was when we got into talking about our dreams and future goals that I realized I was definitely going to go on another date with her. Anna shared how she had recently left her corporate job to pursue her passion for photography full-time. She had always loved taking photos, but after years of working in an office, she finally decided to take the plunge and follow her heart. What struck me most was her confidence. She didn't just talk about her dreams. She had already started building a portfolio, attended workshops, and even done a few shoots for friends. She wasn't waiting for the right moment. She was actively creating it. I could see the fire in her eyes as she spoke about how she wanted to capture real, raw moments. Things that told stories and evoked emotion. It was a reminder of how important it is to follow your passion, no matter how risky or unconventional it may seem. Anna's bravery inspired me, and I realized that she was someone who didn't shy away from challenges. That made me admire her more than I expected, and I found myself wanting to get to know her better. As we parted ways after the date, I felt a sense of excitement that I hadn't felt in a while. I knew I was definitely going to go on another date with her. Her authenticity and determination were qualities I admired, and I couldn't wait to learn more about her journey. Story 12. My date with Jordan started off pretty typical. Small talk over drinks at a bar. We chatted about our work, hobbies, and what we like to do for fun. But something unexpected happened when the topic of movies came up. He told me he was an indie film enthusiast and that he loved supporting smaller films that didn't get the same recognition as the big blockbusters. What really made me take notice, though, was when he shared how he had started a movie night with a group of friends to watch and discuss these films. He wasn't just a passive viewer. He was actively seeking out interesting and unique films, then creating a community around them. I loved the idea of exploring new perspectives and challenging the norm. But what really struck me was his deep understanding of film as an art form. He didn't just watch movies for entertainment. He saw them as a way to connect with the world, understand different cultures, and even spark important conversations. As he spoke about this passion, I felt like I was learning something new. It wasn't often that I met someone who not only had such a unique hobby, but also found a way to turn it into something that brought people together. That's when I realized I was really interested in him. Jordan was thoughtful, creative, and had a way of seeing the world that felt rare and refreshing. By the end of the evening, I was certain that I wanted to go on another date with him. His depth and passion for something he loved were undeniable, and I couldn't wait to dive deeper into his world of indie films and maybe even join that movie night. Story 13. I met Sarah through a mutual friend, and we decided to grab lunch together one afternoon. I had heard she was an artist, and I was curious to learn more about her work. We started with small talk, but as soon as the conversation shifted to art, I was completely captivated. Sarah told me she had been painting for years, and that she had recently started creating abstract pieces that focused on emotions rather than tangible subjects. But it wasn't just her art that fascinated me. It was the way she described her creative process. She explained how she often felt the need to channel her emotions onto the canvas, letting her feelings guide the brushstrokes. It was raw and vulnerable, and I was surprised by how much I connected with it. She also mentioned that she had been experimenting with different mediums, and that her next project was going to be a mix of oil paints and sculptural elements. As Sarah spoke, I could feel her passion and dedication to her craft. It was clear that she wasn't creating just for the sake of creating. She was using her art as a form of self-expression and exploration. The more we talked, the more I realized how much I admired her authenticity. She didn't just make art for herself. She made it for others to experience, to understand, and to feel. By the time lunch was over, I knew I had to see Sarah again. Her creativity and deep emotional connection to her work were qualities I hadn't expected, and they left me wanting to know more about her. I was already thinking about the next time we could meet up, and I couldn't wait to see what she created next. Story 14. I met Mark through a friend, and we decided to meet for a casual dinner at a local restaurant. At first, the date seemed a bit nerve-wracking. We didn't know each other very well, and we both had that typical first date awkwardness. But after a few minutes of chatting, we started to feel more comfortable. We had a lot in common, especially when it came to our love for outdoor activities and fitness. But what really made me think, I'm definitely going on another date with this person, was when Mark shared a story about a recent hiking trip he had taken. He told me how he had challenged himself to complete a difficult trail that was known for being both physically demanding and mentally exhausting. Mark wasn't someone who took on challenges just for the sake of it. He saw this hike as an opportunity to test his limits and push through the discomfort. The best part of the story was when he told me that he didn't do it alone. He had hiked with a group of people he had met at a fitness class, and they all supported each other throughout the trip. It was a perfect example of teamwork, resilience, and the importance of having a positive support system. The way he spoke about the experience made me realize he wasn't just focused on personal growth. He believed in the power of community and helping others succeed as well. I was impressed by his attitude toward life. He wasn't afraid to push himself, but he also understood the value of working together and lifting others up. That kind of mindset was exactly what I was looking for in a partner, and by the end of the date, I knew I was definitely going to see Mark again. Story 15. My date with Kate was one of those rare first encounters where everything just felt right. We met for drinks at a bar downtown, and the chemistry between us was instant. We spent the first hour chatting about the usual, work, hobbies, travel plans, but then Kate surprised me with something unexpected. She shared how she had recently gotten involved in a community garden project in her neighborhood. What started as a small initiative to bring people together had grown into something much larger. Now, there were weekly gardening sessions, educational workshops, and even events to raise awareness about sustainability. Kate told me how much joy she found in seeing the garden flourish, both literally and figuratively, as people from different walks of life came together to grow fresh produce and share resources. What really caught me off guard was how passionate she was about it. This wasn't just a casual hobby for her, it was something she deeply cared about. She explained how the project had brought her closer to her community and how much pride she took in being a part of something that made a real difference. It was clear that Kate wasn't just about talking about positive change, she was actively involved in creating it. I found myself thinking about how inspiring it was to meet someone who wasn't just interested in making the world better on a grand scale, but in making small, meaningful changes right where she lived. That kind of commitment was rare, and by the end of the date, I knew I wanted to see Kate again. Her energy, her passion, and her drive were the kinds of qualities I was looking for in a partner. Story 16. I met Sophie through a mutual friend, and we decided to meet for a casual dinner. The first few minutes of the date were filled with typical small talk, getting to know each other, chatting about work, and sharing what we like to do in our spare time. However, as the conversation progressed, it became clear that there was something different about her. We started talking about travel, and she shared a story about a trip she had taken to a remote village in Peru. Instead of just talking about the tourist spots or the usual things you expect from a vacation, Sophie went into detail about how she spent her time volunteering at a local school. She told me how, during her 2-week stay, she helped teach English to children who had very little access to education. She spoke about the immense challenges the community faced and how the experience shifted her perspective on life. What really struck me was how deeply she seemed to care about the impact of her work, and how humbled she was by the experience. Sophie didn't do it to feel good about herself or post photos of volunteerism. She did it because she genuinely believed in the power of education and wanted to contribute in any way she could. The sincerity in her voice as she described the children's faces when they learned a new word, or when they'd ask her questions about the world beyond their village, made me realize I was sitting across from someone with a heart of gold. By the end of the evening, I knew I wanted to see Sophie again. Her selflessness and ability to connect with people on such a meaningful level made her stand out in a way that few others had. I felt inspired by her outlook on life and excited about the possibility of getting to know her better. Story 17. I met Daniel at a mutual friend's party, and after chatting for a bit, we decided to go for a walk in a nearby park. The evening was beautiful, and the conversation was flowing effortlessly. Daniel was easy to talk to, and we were sharing stories about our families and childhoods. It wasn't until he casually mentioned something that really made me think, I'm definitely going on another date with this guy. He told me how, for the past few years, he had been working on a project to provide mentorship to at-risk youth in his community. He didn't go into it for the recognition or to add something to his resume. He did it because he had once been in a similar situation growing up. Daniel explained how a mentor had helped him during a tough time in his life, and now he felt a deep need to give back. What really struck me was the genuine care and thoughtfulness in his words. Daniel didn't just mentor for the sake of it. He wanted to make a lasting difference in people's lives. He talked about how he stayed in touch with the kids he mentored even after they graduated high school, checking in on them and offering advice when needed. I was incredibly impressed by how dedicated he was, not just to his work, but to making sure these kids had a solid foundation for the future. By the end of the walk, I knew I had found someone with a heart full of compassion and purpose. Daniel's dedication to helping others, especially those who needed it most, was truly admirable. I couldn't wait to see him again.